Let's think about how to get the best playing experience for a 4-piece band that consists of John on lead vocals, Paul on harmony vocals, George on acoustic guitar, and Ringo on cajon. We'll keep it as simple as possible. Therefore, apart from the two main left and right speakers facing the audience, there are two foldback monitors on the floor connected to two auxiliary outputs of a TM30. John stands on one side of the stage with a floor monitor pointing towards him, and Paul stands at the other side of the stage with another floor monitor pointing towards him. George stands in the centre of the stage with his guitar, whilst Ringo sits on his cajon at the back. The audience hears John's voice through the main speakers with his channel fader set high at around -2 dB. Paul's harmonies are set at around -4 dB. And George's acoustic guitar is mixed in a little lower at around -8 dB and blends well through the main outputs. Ringo's cajon is relatively quiet at around -12 dB through the mains. Well, that's all great for the audience. They hear a great mix of the four members of the band. However, to assist their performance, the band members need at least two floor monitors pointing back towards them so that they can hear themselves play with clarity. Anyone with experience playing live knows that standing behind the main speakers sounds bass heavy on stage, and this is because bass frequencies bleed out of the back of the main speakers with very little top end. So, setting up a minimum of a couple of floor monitors for the singers is essential. Now ideally, each performer would get a personal stage monitor. Here though, for simplicity, let's look at setting up two foldback monitors so the singers can hear themselves better with the guitar. Let's think about setting up two foldback monitors so that John and Paul can hear themselves better. The monitor by John's feet is connected to the TM30's auxiliary 1 output. It's named John FB for convenience. The other foldback monitor is by Paul's feet and connected to aux 2 and named Paul FB, Paul's foldback. Let's start by setting John's FB so that he can hear himself and, a little quieter in the FB mix, George's guitar. John doesn't need to hear Paul's harmony in his foldback. The audience will still hear Paul through the main mix, and that's the important thing to remember. The main output mix the audience hears doesn't have to be the same, and frequently isn't the same, as the on-stage foldback mixes emanating from the floor monitors. So, by opening the aux 1 to 8 view with the button here, we see both foldback channels are set to produce a healthy volume level to the respective speakers on the floor. However, owing to not requiring as much volume through both monitors, let's turn them down a little. If they're too quiet, we can always turn them back up again later. We'll set the auxiliary 1 output level for John's monitor to -6 dB. Paul wants a slightly quieter level through his floor monitor, so we'll set that at -7 dB. Right, let's recap. The floor speaker connected to the first auxiliary channel is John's foldback, and is going to his foldback at -6 dB. This is the master auxiliary volume mix of both vocals, guitar and cajon. It will be a mono mix of the vocals and guitar and cajon, though we've not yet set up sending a mix to this floor monitor. All we have established so far is the mix volume it will put out facing John. The other auxiliary speaker is Paul's. It too has not got a mix of vocals and instruments yet. We have only set the speaker's output volume. Let's go back to John's foldback, connected to auxiliary 1, and get a mono mix that suits him. Tap the auxiliary button to open this auxiliary grid. If we look at the right hand side, we see the auxiliary masters listed here. The first one is labelled John FB, and we see its small horizontal slider indicating the master volume level we set up a moment ago. We now need to send a mix of the vocals and instruments to this aux 1 master channel. Horizontally across the top here we see the input channel names. John's Vox channel is the first one. Now John wants to hear his own vocal in his floor monitor. Remember, this is the John FB channel we see in the auxiliary masters column at the right. So with the John Vox channel, let's drag the aux 1 slider to the right so that he can hear himself in the John FB speaker on the floor. We'll take it up fairly high. We can always adjust this in a moment. John also wants to hear George's guitar. He wants this to be mixed in with his vocal, albeit at a slightly quieter level. So let's drag the auxiliary 1 slider across for the George guitar channel. So far then we have a mini mix of John's vocal and George's guitar being sent to the master auxiliary 1 channel, labelled John FB, that John can hear from the speaker by his feet. And that mini mix of his vocal and guitar has its overall output volume controlled by the auxiliary master labelled John FB. If we now select the John FB button here at the left, we see a clearer view of what we just set up. We see John's vocal set at, just about minus 9.5 dB there. That's being sent to the John FB auxiliary master channel at a level of minus 6 dB. Paul's vocal is not heard in John's foldback. John doesn't want to hear Paul's vocal, so Paul's level is set to silence, as is Ringo's cajon level at the moment, though John wants some cajon in his floor monitor mix. So let's raise the fader to minus 13 dB. George's guitar is also being sent to John's FB speaker by his feet. Let's turn it up a little by raising the fader there. So this monitor mix that John hears through his floor monitor is different to what the audience hears through the main outputs. Tapping the main mix button at the top left shows the channel faders at different volume levels. Let's set up Paul's monitor mix now by selecting the Paul FB button here at the left. He only wants his vocal and George's guitar to emerge from his floor monitor connected to auxiliary channel 2. So let's set them like that. We'll set Paul's vocal being sent to his monitor to minus 4 dB. And he wants George's guitar to emerge from his floor monitor too, so let's set this to minus 10 dB. So Paul hears his own voice and George's guitar from his floor monitor connected to auxiliary 2 and labelled here as Paul FB. Remember, Paul's mono foldback mix is different to what the audience hears in stereo through the main mix, as can be seen here. And this is different to John's FB mix coming out of his floor monitor in mono. Here's Paul's foldback mix again, and the main mix. And then finally, by opening the auxiliary out 1 to 8 view, we see the two mono monitor mixes set to output through their respective floor speakers at these volumes. So with both of those auxiliaries set up, we can always adjust how loud or how quiet those mini mono mixes emanate by utilizing the respective faders within the auxiliary out 1 to 8 view. So that's a quick run through then, how we set up auxiliary mixes for different members of a band.